We are one promise away from finishing the Forward to Project 2025. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's just hop in. Promise number 4, secure our God-given individual right to enjoy the blessings of liberty. The Declaration of Independence famously asserted the belief of America's founders that all men are created equal and endowed with God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the last, the pursuit of happiness, that is central to America's heroic experiment in self-government. When the founders spoke of pursuit of happiness, what they meant might be understood today as, in essence, pursuit of blessedness. That is, an individual must be free to live as his creator ordained. I really don't think that that's what the founders meant, but what do I know? Our Constitution grants each of us liberty to do not what we want, but what we ought. This pursuit of the good life is found primarily in family, marriage, children, Thanksgiving dinners, and the like. Many find happiness through their work. Think of dedicated teachers or healthcare professionals you know. MAGA hates teachers and healthcare professionals. They spent the majority of the last 4 years targeting teachers as peddlers of porn and healthcare professionals as liars and members of the deep state who are trying to poison your family with vaccines. Entrepreneurs or plumbers throwing themselves into their business. Anyone who sees a job well done as a personal reward. Religious devotion and spirituality are the greatest sources of happiness around the world. Still, others find themselves happiest in their local volunteer community of friends, their neighbors, their civic or charitable work. The American Republic was founded on principles prioritizing and maximizing individuals' rights to live their best life or to enjoy what the framers called the blessings of liberty. It's this radical equality, liberty for all, not just of rights, but of authority, that the rich and powerful have hated about democracy in America since 1776. They resent America's audacity in insisting that we don't need them to tell us how to live. Again, the hypocrisy, the irony is dripping. The entire MAGA agenda is telling people how to live, who they can love, what clothes they can wear, what bathrooms they can use. They want us all to fit in their tiny little boxes of how people should act, and then they call that freedom because they're allowed to do that to us, I guess. It's this inalienable right of self-direction, of each person's opportunity to direct himself or herself and his or her community to the good that the ruling class disdains. With the Declaration and the Constitution, our nation's founders handed to us the means with which to preserve this right. Abraham Lincoln wrote of the Declaration as an apple of gold in a silver frame, the Constitution. So must the next conservative president look to these documents when the elites mount their next assault on liberty. Trump called for terminating the Constitution back in 2022 on his Truth Social app, by the way. So with the revelation of massive and widespread fraud and deception and working closely with big tech companies, the DNC and the Democratic Party, do you throw the presidential election results of 2020 out and declare the rightful winner, or do you have a new election? A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. So again, Heritage Foundation, you guys are just liars and hypocrites. Left to our own devices, the American people rejected European monarchy and colonialism just as we rejected slavery, second-class citizenship for women, mercantilism, socialism, Wilsonian globalism, fascism, communists, and today, wokeism. To the left, these assertions of patriotic self-assurance are just so many signs of our moral depravity and intellectual inferiority, proof that in fact we need a ruling elite making decisions for us. To be clear, the American people did not reject slavery or second-class citizenship for women. Women and slaves fought for their rights, and the American people hated that they were fighting for those rights. We had to change the Constitution. We had to change laws. We had to, people had to die and fight in the streets. There was a war about ending those things. We didn't reject those things. We embraced those things as Americans. But the next conservative president should be proud, not ashamed of Americans' unique culture of social equality and ordered liberty. After all, the countries where Marxist elites have won political and economic power are all weaker, poorer, and less free for it. The United States remains the most innovative and upwardly mobile society in the world. Government should stop trying to substitute its own preferences for those of the people, and the next conservative president should champion the dynamic genius of free enterprise against the grim miseries of elite directed socialism. The promise of socialism, communism, Marxism, progressivism, fascism, whatever name it chooses, is simple. Government control of the economy can ensure equal outcomes for all people. The problem is that it has never done so. There is no such thing as the government. There are just people who work for the government and wield its power, and who, at almost every opportunity, wield it to serve themselves first and everyone else a distant second. This is not a failing of one nation or socialist party, but inherent in human nature. It's inherent in MAGA human nature, because they're a bunch of criminal freaks. Nighttime satellite images of the Korean peninsula famously show the free market South lit up, with homes, businesses, and cities electrified from coast to coast. By contrast, communist North Korea is almost completely dark, except for the small dot of the capital city, Pyongyang, where a psychotic dictator and his cronies live. The same phenomenon is on display in the infuriating fact that 4 of the 6 richest counties in the United States are suburbs of Washington, D.C., a city infamous for its lack of native productive industries. We see the same corruption expressed on an individual level whenever billionaire climate activists who want to outlaw carbon-fueled transportation fly to A-list conferences on their private jets, or when COVID-19 shutdown policies like former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Governor Gavin Newsom were caught at the hair salon or dining at fancy restaurants after moralizing about how everyone else must stay home and forego such luxuries during the pandemic. Or the hypocriticism of like 40% of Trump's cabinet picks being sexual abusers while claiming to be good Christian family men. For socialists, who are almost always well-to-do, socialism is not a means of equalizing outcomes, but a means of accumulating power. They never get around to helping anyone else. The Soviet Empire was a social and economic failure. North Korea, despite the opulence of its tyrants, is one of the poorest nations in the world. Cuba is so corrupt that its people regularly risk their lives to escape to Florida on rafts. Venezuela was once the richest nation in South America. Today, a decade after a Marxist dictator took over, 94% of Venezuelans live in poverty. Even Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont was forced to repeal the state's single-payer healthcare system just 3 years after creating it. In every case, socialist elites promised that if only they could direct the economy, everything would be better. Very quickly, everything got worse. In socialist nation after socialist nation, the only way the government could keep its disgruntled people in line was to surveil and terrorize them. By contrast, in countries with a high degree of economic freedom, elites are not in charge because everyone is in charge. People work, build, invest, save, and create according to their own interests and in service to the common good of their fellow citizen. There is a reason why the private economy hews the maxim, the customer is always right, while government bureaucracies are notoriously user-unfriendly, just as there is a reason why private charities are cheerful and government welfare systems are not. That's such a weird analogy. I've worked for the county. I've volunteered with federally funded food banks or privately funded women's shelters. I volunteered with my church growing up. And all of those things taught me that people are kind. People who want to help are going to help people. And the only real difference between like privately funded nonprofit and a government funded nonprofit or a government job is the amount of pay you're going to be making and the benefits you're getting. Which Project 2025 would slash all government nonprofits, by the way. So it's not because grocery store clerks and PTA moms are good and federal bureaucrats are bad. It's because private enterprises, for profit or nonprofit, must cooperate to give, to succeed. It sure sounds like you guys are saying that one is better than the other. So as the American people take back their sovereignty, constitutional authority, respect for their families and communities, they should also take back their right to pursue a good life. The next president should promote pro-growth economic policies that spur new jobs and investment, higher wages, and productivity. Yes, that agenda should include overdue tax and regulatory reform, but it should go further and include antitrust enforcement against corporate monopolies. It should promote educational opportunities outside the woke-dominated system of public schools and universities, including trade schools, apprenticeship programs, and student loan alternatives that fund students' dreams instead of Marxist academics. Just as important as expanding opportunities for workers and small businesses, the next president should crack down on the crony capitalist corruption that enables America's largest corporations to profit through political influence rather than competitive enterprise and customer satisfaction. Our government is being shadow ran by Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who is doing it in service of his own private companies. Analogous pro-growth reforms for America's voluntary civil society are also in order. America is not an economy, it is a country. Economic freedom is not the only important freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and the freedom to assemble also represent key components of the American promise. Today, in addition to the problem of big tech censorship, we see speakers at universities shouted down. That's protected free speech. Parents investigated and arrested for attempting to speak at school board meetings, and donors to conservatives causes harassed and intimidated. The next American president must defend our First Amendment rights.